welcome to the session. I will hand over to, just a moment. I will hand over to our moderator, Eddie Njemba from Uganda, a very resourceful person from the Red Cross Climate Center, who will then run us through the program and welcome our next speakers. So over to you, Eddie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Please proceed.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Leah. And to all our participants, you are most welcome. Well, we would like this to be as interactive as possible. So in the chat, if you can all access your keyboard, whether on phone or on computer, please type in what is the one thing that you'd like to get out of this session. Please just type it in there. Yes, I am Eddie Njemba, an urban resilience advisor at the Red Cross and Red Crescent Climate Center. I am based in Uganda, and I'm happy to be facilitating this particular session. What can you expect in terms of the lineup? We shall be having some welcome remarks shortly, and then that will be followed by a presentation on climate smart fisheries, management for sustainable and resilient coastal communities. That then we will have another presentation about using community adaptation labs to develop climate risk profiles for local action planning and policy influence in Mukuru informal settlements. We will delve into a moment of reflection in a plenary setting. So again, I will invite you, when you have a question, when you have a comment, during the plenary session, please feel free to unmute and speak. Then while you are not speaking, please do as you are doing right now. Please keep your microphone muted. After a short reflection about the two presentations, then we will move on to our next two presentations, one on pastoralist adaptation strategies, and then another one on enhancing adaptive strategies to cope with climate-induced coastal erosion in Ghana. Again, we will go into a short but very useful reflection about the two presentations, and there we will be drawing to an end or to the closure of the session with some closing remarks. Because we would like to have this session as participatory as possible, remember to use the chat function. The chat function is kind of unlimited. You don't need to wait for someone to stop talking and then you send your question or comment. So please feel free to go on and share your thoughts in the chat function. Now with that, would also like to request our speakers, when your turn comes, please open your camera so we can see you, so we can put face to the voice. All right, I think that's it. Let me now invite Dr. Joanes Atela to offer the opening remarks. Over to you, Dr. Joanes.
Well, my lighting system seems not to be very clear, but I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you and we can see you. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Eddie. I really appreciated to have this opportunity to say a word in this very important event. I know we have really excellent presentations lined up in terms of trying to understand what is happening at the local level and some of the experiences with adaptation. But allow me just to say two words, so two things in just trying to set the scene for this particular timely discussion. Number one is in the fact that adaptation to climate change is becoming very fundamental for African countries, not just because they have been actually profiled in the NDCs, but because there is a passion by African governments and stakeholders to be able to, strengthen the resilience, especially of the vulnerable communities. So this makes the discussion or the debates around adaptation to be very critical, even as we approach the COP27 in Egypt. Africa for a long time has been prioritizing adaptation in its policy prepositions through NDCs. But I think we are at a point where we are rethinking adaptation. What does adaptation mean to us? What does it entail? What does it bring to the table for the African local person who is actually suffering the impacts of climate change, but probably is not even aware of some of these decisions that are being made around adaptation at the national or at the global level. So that particular fundamental question brings in a very important thinking in the minds of many stakeholders, that how do we make adaptation relevant to the African context? And I think this is where we now have the pursuit, and this brings me to my second point, around the pursuit for locally led adaptation. The locally led adaptation pursuit has been seen or has been profiled as an opportunity for most local systems within Africa to be able to be empowered to, take or engage much more actively in adaptation actions and be able to really have a voice in the policy spaces or in the decision making. There has been a lot of attention, there has been a lot of efforts in terms of mobilizing resources, mobilizing technologies, mobilizing opportunities and partnerships to be able to support locally led adaptation, not only in Africa, but of course in other developing contexts as well. Now, with this kind of mobilization, the question we need to continue asking, as I've said in my the statement I just made a few seconds ago, is what does locally led adaptation mean for the African context, the African local community? Indeed, locally led adaptation is a beautiful concept. It's being, taken up, it's being talked about in different platforms at the global level, the COPs, our regional meetings such as this, in many discussions at the national level. The concept of locally led adaptation is remaining or becoming fundamental driver of the thinking, the programming, the planning for adaptation for local communities. But again, as we look into this, what does this mean for these local communities? You could be aware that the Global Commission on Adaptation last year, in the run-up to the COP26 in Glasgow, highlighted some of the principles that basically underpin locally led adaptation. Fundamentally, some of these principles are related to the pursuit of climate justice and basically shifting power and resources from the many powerful elites who have basically dominated the adaptation space to the communities who are actually suffering the impacts of climate change. There are many other elements, good things within those particular principles, aspects of equity, ensuring that we are considerate of the equity issues in these localities, that we are considerate of the gender issues in these localities whenever we are designing adaptation intervention. And most importantly, the elements of rights, because everything is also about the rights. How do we protect the rights of the marginalized communities in an ecosystem where we are having a complexity of actors, a complexity of interests that are coming to interplay with the resources that are important for local adaptation? How do you ensure that we safeguard the rights of these communities, not only to access these particular resources, but also to be able to utilize these resources effectively to enhance their adaptive capacity and to become more resilient to the impacts of climate change? Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very fundamental question because, as I conclude, there are evidence, or there is information or research that shows that despite the fact that there's a lot of efforts to support adaptation at the local level through the locally led adaptation concept, there is evidence that some of the marginalized communities, like the pastoralists, the women groups, the disabled, are becoming more vulnerable despite the many years of investment in adaptation actions at the local level. So the question I want to leave this particular panel or this particular event with is, what is it that is important? What should we think about to make locally led adaptation really aligned to the priorities of the local people, and especially the marginalized groups in this particular case? So I want to thank you so much. And on behalf of the Africa Research and Impact Network, I want to take this opportunity to say that these are some of the fundamental things that we are passionate about. We are passionate about sharing some of the best practices, because the only way we are going to unlock these questions is by showing the evidence about the experiences around locally led adaptation from different African contexts. And this is what the Africa Research and Impact Network is very passionate about. So I want to really wish you well, and I do look forward to a very insightful discussion around this timely topic, even as we head to COP27. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Dr. Joanes Atela, providing us with a context under which all our conversations are going to hinge. Right now, without any further waiting, I'm going to invite the first presenter today. Now, just a note to the presenters. When what I'll do, when it's halftime, I will show up first with the camera here, and that just to let you know that you have 5 more minutes. In case you don't recognize me, I may as well just say something so that we can be able to manage and maximize the time that we have together. Dr. Nwamaka, please come and tell us about the climate smart fisheries management for sustainable and resilient coastal communities.
Thank you, Eddie. Nwamaka's slides are coming up anytime now so that she's able to then speak to them. Perfect.
As the slides come, to all our participants, feel free, maximize the chat function here. It's quite a useful function to use. And here we go. We do have the slides of Dr. Nwamaka. Nwamaka, over to you. Dr. Nwamaka, the floor is yours. Climate smart fisheries management for sustainable and resilient coastal communities. For all of you, our participants, what question do you come with about climate smart fisheries? For example, we can have a brief discussion here as we wait for Dr. Nwamaka to unmute. Do you have any question related to climate smart fisheries? Please type it in the chat so that you can inspire our thoughts. Dr. Nwamaka says, okay, I actually can't see. I think you have to unmute me. Tech support. This is where we need the tech support.
So Dr. Nwamaka has been unmuted. So if you could please just give it a try.
Dr. Nwamaka, can you hear us? Can you speak?
Technology always presents surprises. How about we go to the next presenter as
Yes.
we try to fix that. Okay, no, we cannot hear you, Dr. Nwamaka. So tech support, please help Doctor on the sidebar in the side chat so that, yes, thank you very much, so that we can be able to hear about climate smart. Well, Mr. Haron Akala, you win yourself a slot free of charge, a swap here. Would you please come and indulge us in a conversation about community adaptation labs?
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Hope you can hear me, and I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible, and we can see your slides.
Yeah, you can see my slide. Thank you so much. I'm going to do a presentation on behalf of the team that were involved in the implementation of this assignment that was funded by ARA and the micro grantee. And the topic that I'll be doing is about the using the community adaptation labs to co-assess the climate risk in the urban informal settlement at the case of Mukuru. And this assignment was funded by ARA. And just to highlight some of the key actors and partners who have been involved in the process, both from the Tomorrow City, the micro grantee, and just be able to not exhausted all the logos, but these are just some of them. We have others who have been working with them closely to make sure that we are able to continue, we're able to implement the assignment. And apologies, Eddie, I've not introduced myself. My name is Aaron Akana. I'm a research fellow with the African Research and Impact Network, and I'm supporting in terms of the data management, and also have a background in GIS and report sensing. So I'm pleased to continue with the presentation. So in terms of just brief introduction, if you look at the experiences that we're having in Africa, it's projected by 2050, half of the population will be living in the urban area. And if you look at the case that we are having, especially in the informal, in the developing countries, we realize that the policy attention that are being implemented, especially in developing countries, we realize they are more of reactive and not proactive. And as the more population move to the city, there is we find that one aspect remains constant. So what is the way are we going to make sure that we have a more of an inclusive city? So adaptation planning in Kenya is still it's still at the national level, and now if you look at the local level, it's not being devolved there. So that means that there's been an exclusion of the informal urban settings, mainly due to lack of clear articulation of the climate risk. So if you come to the case of Mukuru, Mukuru is one of the informal settlements in Kenya, And there is what we call the special planning area. And there's a tool that the national government of Kenya is using to upgrade the informal settlement. It's called the special planning area. So this special planning area has been rolled off in Mukuru, started in Mukuru, and Mukuru started benefiting from the upgrading of the informal settlement. But now the question that we need to ask ourselves is the planning being inclusive? And that is why that's the question that we'll be able to answer at the end of this presentation. So the SPA has not taken into account the existing climatic risk and associated disaster. And that's why this work is aimed to promoting the co-produced, community-led risk assessment to inform the ongoing slum upgrading and the climate adaptation planning. So I'll just move next to the next slide. So just to give a brief description about the study area, Mukuru is one of the informal settlements within Nairobi, and it was declared an SPA in the year 2019. And this SPA was just to freeze any development activities within 2 years to ensure that we come up with a plan that is well informed and where it's co-produced with the community and all the other stakeholders. And this was now piloted in Mukuru and will be implemented in the other informal settlement in Nairobi. So this is Mukuru. This is the map of the entire Nairobi. That's the land use and land coverage, the land cover of Nairobi. And you can see Mukuru here, which is within the build-up area. And now this is now the SPA where we have, this is Mukuru. We have the Mukuru, which is divided into 3. This is Mukuru Wandani, this is Mukuru kwa Ruben, and this is Mukuru kwa Njenga. So now, as I said earlier, that the implementation of the SPA will be rolled over to the other informal settlement, and also good so that we can be able to state some of the informal settlement that we have within Nairobi. We have not conversant with that, but I think SDI, they have more of the actual information about this. But what I know is we have more than 11 informal settlement within Nairobi, and out of this 11 informal settlement, majority of this informal settlement lie close to the river bank. So which means profiling the climate risk within the informal settlement, it's really key, and this needs to be included in planning. So what was the methodology that we adopted for this assignment? First, the first thing that we did was to do a desktop study of the urban climate risk tools. And for this, we were able to visit some of the key studies that has been done. There was a study that was done in Nakuru about the risk and vulnerability assessment that was under the the SIACA program. We also been able to revise some of the tools that was under the climate risk assessment of the World Bank. That's the urban risk assessment understanding of tools. There were 13 tools that were recommended that can be used for understanding the climate risk within the informal settlement. And then we also been able to also link it with the manual that was developed by the international network. How do we approach it in a participatory way? Because we needed it to be more from a bottom-up approach where the community, they're the ones who have been given the first priority to share what they have, and then we use the science part of it as researchers to be able to support them. And then once we did this one, we also had a conversation with the IFRC, the lead from the IFRC, to understand, okay, we already have mapped these tools. How can we go about with it, since Red Cross has been one of the institutions who are working closely with the community. So from there, now we were able to develop to understand how an integrated tool can come up. And what we did, we went to the community, and we had different labs that we were approaching. We had the household lab, we had the community lab, and then we had the policy decision makers lab, and then we had the NGO lab. So with this one, we gave them the different platforms that we had was to see how can we able to come up with more of a tool that is well integrated, and this tool that is more of inclusive and is able to capture all the aspects in terms of climate, and also consider what is needed, especially in the informal settlement. So especially, I'll just give just a slight background about how we went about, especially for the household lab. When we invited the household lab to discuss, as you can see, this is just part of the community lab that we had. We ensured that we have captured, we ensured that we have invited everyone from across the social group, the persons with disability, those ones who are the elderly, women, the men. We were able to invite them so that we are able to capture, okay, how do we go about when you want to profile the situation in informal settlement? What are the perspectives that each and every social group is able to share, or have they been able to experience? What are their perspective? And that's how we are able to come up with that. And then we developed the climate profile map for Mukuru. And then this was now, how can the output of this work be engaged in future? That means this is key, especially in the SPA development, and where it's needed to be integrated. The knowledge that we gathered there needs to be integrated in the entire plan. However, what we did next was to make sure that such work does not stop there. We worked with, we also integrated this same work in other projects that I'll be able to share, I'll be able to discuss later. So once we were able to profile that one, we went ahead to the community, and if you can look, this is just still part of the methodology. The community, we gave the community an opportunity to be able to help us to map those climate, but how do they feel the essence of being the source of information as the community. And you can see here they were able to help us to draw, identify the hazard hotspots, and able to identify and tell us what are some of the common hazards that they're experiencing, and what are those factors that they make them to be very exposed and vulnerable to such hazards. And you can, so once we can also see that we went ahead and did a flood transect work, and to see what are the best practices that this community are doing, and how can we go ahead and try and map this one and see, okay, yes, climate risk we want to understand that the adaptation of this community. We need to make sure that we understand all the variables or all the indicators that can be able to define how a community is at risk to certain hazard. And we also went ahead and understand how do climate lead to fire hazards, and what are those some of those best practices you can the community, the best or the bad practices that the community are practicing. And if you can see here, you can see that this river, it's not clean, and there's a lot of dumping here, and you can see the structures are just constructed next to the river. And here you can see this is supposed to be a drainage network, and it's not, as you can see, and then the structures are close to each other, and so on. So which means this community are exposed. So what were the emerging opportunities that came out from what we did based on the labs that we did? So we went ahead and used the opportunities that we got from what we had done with the community and the NGO and House of Lab, and to profile it higher. And that's where we came up with we under the Tomorrow City, we did the flood modeling and the fire modeling, so that you can be able to understand the deeper understanding of the climate, the risks that the community are facing within Mukuru, in Mukuru. So I can look at this diagram, just trying to show how the information is supposed to flow from where we have in the field situation, data, and then when we have this data, we need to have the information, and then the knowledge, and then the urban forum. So the urban forum, this is where we always have more of the decision making being done. So this is supposed to be a loop where once the decision is being done, it's supposed to go back to the community. So, and then we do the assessment. So any activity that's supposed to be done within the community level, within a given area, and then in the urban city should have a loop where once it's being implemented, we can be able to go back and see what we want to understand the more of the before and after the intervention, what is the impact. So if you look at some of we just go to the results that we did under the modeling. We did two modeling. We did the flood modeling and fire modeling, and you can see this is the entire Mukuru. This is the entire Mukuru, and just pointing to this area here. This area, if I can say this area is a school. There's a school that is constructed in this area. And if you could look at the flood depth here, you can see it's high. So that means despite that the community are living around this area, even the children who are in that school, they're exposed. It's Bridge International School, which is located in this place. So this is river, the Ngong River. So in case there is heavy rainfall, and just to point out that the flooding that's happening in Mukuru is not because of the rain that's raining within Mukuru, it's just because the water that is coming from the upstream. So that means that the school is exposed. So if I can just go to just show some of the fire modeling that we did, and you can see that from these two images that we have here, you can see in case this is just a small area within Mukuru, and this is just a small area within the same Mukuru where there was an intervention of a road network. So without the intervention, without an intervention or development, which we all understand that development have different indicators, it means that in case there is hazard, that the exposure it's high. But at this area, you can see the exposure is low. But what are those climatic conditions that leads to increased fire, instead of fire spread? We have the temperature, we have wind, we have rainfall. Those are some of the climatic conditions that we consider to understand the climatic risk within the informal settlement. So how do we use this information that you have gathered to feed into the tomorrow city? That is where we want to see how can we integrate the adaptation metrics into the local urban planning. So this is just a framework that is being used under the tomorrow city for the decision support environment, but we are using the existing information that we already have to see how can we profile this information to the higher level. And you can see that as I stated here, we want to understand what's the future of the city, the future of Mukuru. The community of Mukuru, they want Mukuru to be like this. But how do we make sure that we integrate what they want into, how do we make sure that the plan, what they want is being part of the plan that are being implemented within Mukuru. So we need to make sure that we are able to gather enough data so that we can do some of the computational modeling. We can be able to have the community themselves so that we can have a agreed impact metrics and be able to come up with the output that's well represented. But who are the consumer of this information, and what is the vehicle? So for us to be able to make sure this one, it means that we need to have a climate resilient city. And the climate resilient city means that we have the MCR 2030 under the UNDRR, which is the vehicle that's supporting making the cities resilient in 2030. We have the backup, the building resilient building. Sorry, I forgot it, but anyway, I'll remember and then I'll post it on the chat. ARIN is supporting in terms of research. We have the SDUH is one of the part of the research that we are doing. It's part of the bigger research that it's part of the vehicle that can be used to profile the work that has been done, especially in the local level, to profile this one to the higher level. So which means the adaptation metrics that have been collected there can be computed and come up with where we are linking it with the policy, we are linking it with the planning that's existing, and coming up with an output that is able to represent the situation within the community. And that is very key to make sure that we are being able to represent the community in terms of the key things that they're experiencing within where they are staying. So what were the key outcomes that came out of this one? Flood and landslide are risk that dominates, especially in Mukuru. And we also realized that vulnerability to climate risk are high in Mukuru, and there's low capacity. And then also, without not forgetting that the impacts of drought are also felt in Mukuru through water shortages. And then there was high food prices due to low supply. And then there was exclusive planning where the community were not involved in the planning. few of the representation of those communities that were involved in the planning were few. And then there was loss of interest, and thus different perception in climate risk and the implication. So especially where the actors who are playing the private sector, the policymakers, and the community members, those are disjoint in terms of understanding what do we mean by the term climate risk. And then those many aren't aware about this risk, and since the area is unplanned and many are exposed to hazard risk. And then the last outcome was the government too is too keen in infrastructure development lens and less keen in risk-proof planning and development. And then just final slide. Eddie, you can just allow me, this is the final slide. 1 minute, I'll be able to finish on this final slide.
Please go on, please.
Okay. So what are the lessons that were learned? What are the lessons learned based on the study? So there's we need to ensure that there's a linkage and building on the ongoing urban risk to ensure that there's an enhanced synergy towards impact, especially between the different actors who are within the disaster ecosystem. And then also we need to co-produce adaptation options at the local level is paramount, where we need to make sure that it's an inclusive planning, because when you implement a plan, it has a choice. It has a choice, and that choice has a value. So that value need to be inclusive, where all the voices are being considered. And then climate risk-proof planning essential in slum upgrading process are acknowledged by all stakeholders. So we need to make sure that all these planning are able to address the climate change and potential impact of climate within based on the implementation, based on the plan and how those plans are being implemented. And then the other thing is that there's need for more time and more resources required to realize the ultimate impact, so that you can be able to integrate climate risk knowledge in the SPA, especially looking at the community themselves. Few of them, they had a knowledge about climate risk. And then the other bit is about how can we be able to make sure that the community are able to get this knowledge, and also the actors are able to get such knowledge, and make sure that it's inclusive decision support.
Inclusive decision support.
Yes, and enhancing community-based labs.
Thank you very much, Herman. I know you have really tried so much to fit into this short time, fitting an experience that takes more than 1 year into 15 minutes is not an easy thing. So thank you very much. And I hope that the participants are inspired to ask questions, to offer comments. Do you relate to the experience? Do you have some questions? Please type them in the chat. And then let's move on from the city to probably the periphery. Herman, you please stay on. We will be getting some moment to ask questions. No, it's okay. You may put off the camera, but stay around. We will have a time to ask the questions. I am using Zoom app on my phone. Okay, someone is still managing Dr. Nwamaka. Here we go. Let me invite Professor Eben Nathan to tell us about pastoralist adaptation strategies. And yes, thank you very much.
Let me just see if I can share my screen.
Please. Seems to be working well.
Hopefully it will continue. Yes, no, it did it again. I thought so, but 1 second. Let me see if I can find out how to do this. Can you see it now? The presentation?
Yes, in perfect form.
Oh, so first of all, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk a little bit about RARE, for the invitation here. I would say that I'm here as representative for our team, and some of them are present here now. And I will just encourage all of you to, to break in if you think I forgot something, or if you have some things that you think are important. So so in this sense, I feel just like the representative of this project. I'm Iben, and I'm from the University of Copenhagen, working at the IFRO at the section of Global Development, and originally from political science, but also working together with the foresters and biologists in my department, quite interdisciplinary, and that's probably a strength, I think, working with the adaptation and climate change. So what I'm going to do is to...
Leah, are you still able to hear Iben?
Yes, I was able to hear Iben.
Okay.
Okay,
please.
So I hope you are able, in general at least.
Yes.
Okay, so sorry if somebody cannot hear. But so I'm going to tell you about RARE, what the project is about, and just the formalities around it. And then I plan to give you an example of some of our findings. And hopefully I can manage to do that within 15 minutes. So RARE, or Rights and Resilience in Kenya, is a research project that is funded by the Danish Research Council, which again is funded by the Foreign Ministry and DANIDA, the Danish Agency for Development Aid. And it's a project that is carried out in collaboration between the University of Nairobi, 3 different departments, also with the ARIN. We also have a collaboration, a strong collaboration now, which is really nice, especially up here to COP27, the University of Copenhagen, but also the University of Roskilde. Paul is not here today, and also with the Danish Institute of International Studies. So these are the involved in institutions. We also have a collaboration with ILRI. The purpose of our research project is to investigate how adaptation strategies interact with land needs, land conflicts, and new land law reforms in Kenya, and what the implications are for efforts to support community land rights for resilient rural development. We have formulated our broad development objective as to ensure secure and peaceful access to land for climate change adaptation, and thereby resilience of all Kenyan citizens. I was actually thinking that it could be nice if you could give me a hint when there are a few minutes left, so I can finish off in time. But this is the development objective, and the pictures, the photos are from 2019. Some of us doing work in the field, talking to pastoralists there. But we are quite a big team here. We have that everything's relative, but we have 4 different work packages. The first work package is concerned with adaptation and land needs, looking into peri-urban pastoralism, cross-tenure adaptation, and gender, Maasai women, and adaptation. We have the work package 2 that is looking more into adaptation and land conflicts, and the focus has moved to especially large-scale land acquisition and conservancy, and their impact on the pastoralists. Often.
I just want to see because
the third one is about land law reforms and adaptation. That's where I'm involved the most, together within work package 4. So in work package 3, we look at how the new land laws, the land laws in Kenya and the devolution work together with the pastoralist options for and strategies for adaptation. And the last work package is about how to deal with conflicting land claims related to climate change adaptation. It's a bit more solution-oriented, something that we will especially be able to say much more about towards the end. But of course, there's also things going on now, a lot. Global-local relations, how adaptation policies affect the local level and the other way around, the role of civil society organizations in all this, and trying to figure out what have been the best practices in Kenya and abroad that we can learn from. We have our fieldwork in the northern part of, or in the middle part of Kenya, but north of Nairobi, in Samburu. and in the southern part in Kajiado. There are some similarities, but there are also many differences, of course, and many of you know much better. But I think what they have in common, especially is it's in the arid and semi-arid lands that both are very much affected by climate change. There are droughts. In Samburu, there's contested community lands, seasonal migration, many overlapping land claims. And in Kajiado, there's sort of the same problems, but there's also the rural-urban dynamics. Kajiado is also characterized by early privatization of land. We have been looking into that. So the background, as I've already indicated, is the whole situation about climate change in Kenya's arid and semi-arid lands. The drought disasters you have witnessed in Kenya, the erratic heavy rainfalls that are coming now and then, rising temperatures, and so on. And classically, we know from many studies and from being there that pastoralists have over time adapted to changing weather, and they are quite famous for actually knowing how to adapt to climate, to weather changes, by mobility, migration, and also transforming to a certain extent into sedentary farmers. So there has also been this livelihood diversification that we witness. The pictures you see on the bottom is to illustrate how the situation has looked like in some places in Samburu, but it's a photo downloaded from Google. But I will come back with some of the photos we took from the field in a little while. The other aspect of the background is more the historical background about pastoralist and land rights in Kenya. And as you all know, land rights has been a very dominant political theme in Kenya. It was at least to a high extent causing the post-election violence in 2007. And it continues to be a very huge issue. And the pastoralists themselves, for all their adaptation strategies, they, at least within the present mode of production, they depend on access to vast rangelands to keep on migrating with their cattle for pasture and water. But then we have this increasing pressure on land and also on the mode of production from large-scale infrastructure projects, from conservancies, from land sale and land grabbing, and especially in Kajiado, things move very quickly with regard to land sale and individualization and privatization of the land. In Samburu and in the north, maybe you see also some of these infrastructure projects like the one illustrated in the picture in the middle. And then from our own fieldwork in Samburu in 2019, we took a picture of this very decorative fence. So fences are coming up all over the place because of individualization and privatization of land. That makes it really difficult for pastoralists, Samburu pastoralists to move around. And finally, climate change itself is putting some constraint on land rights. But then I wanted to move a little bit also to this issue of the new legal frameworks. Most of you will be, I'm sure, familiar, many of you, with the changes that has happened in Kenya since 2010 with the new constitution. And one of the issues that has attracted much attention from many scholars and from where is the Community Land Act, and which was also implied by Kenya's constitution, where there's a lot of emphasis on actually transferring land rights to pastoralists so that they get rights to community land, and also to develop land administration that aims at involving many more groups into deciding about what happens in these lands. For instance, women who have not, who in the old traditional way of managing the rangelands have not had a place, especially not in Samburu. So This is sort of the state of the art, what has happened. There's the National Climate Change Act also, one of the first in Africa, building resilience and enhancing adaptive capacity. So one of the projects here, and it's not covering all the findings, we don't have time for that, unfortunately, but this has been, I think, maybe one of the main issues also to see how these different acts work together and determine the pastoralist options for adaptation. This Community Land Act, which is really a progressive and very, very nice law when you read it, because it really takes into consideration all the rights of different groups like youth, like women, even handicapped persons. It actually seems in Samburu to have exactly the opposite effect. And that is quite interesting. There are places, well, I mean, the law gives pastoralists the option to decide to become community land and get the registration as community land. But actually only few group ranchers decided to stay community land. Instead, many communities have decided to subdivide. That means they divide the land between them and privatize. This is a process that has been going on for many years. Kajiado, I think, has been in the front of this process due to its proximity to Nairobi, but it's also been in process in Samburu. So part of the research has been to find out what drives this subdivision. Now we have this very, very nice law, and there are a lot of different aspects. The county government has the idea that there's a need to individualize because of the tragedy of the commons. So you can even read it in the document. So this is one driver. But the communities themselves also experience a lot of uncertainty because they don't really know what's going on, and the information is very contradictory. It's not very clear. So here are some quotes from our interviews in January in one of our fieldworks in Samburu. They are afraid that the government will take over if they don't get registered as private individual owners of land. They also think that when the neighboring group ranches subdivide, they had to too, because otherwise, if you cannot access their land for pasture, you can risk that they will access your land, and that will be a problem. So it has to be more equal. Many people hope that they can actually get registration, title, and land security. Some of the elders are afraid of the new situation because their power is actually undermined by the new constitutional decision. Many pastoralists are experiencing so much hardship that they can see that the situation as it is now is simply not possible to continue as they have always done. They feel there's overpopulation of people and cattle. Also the attitude among pastoralists has changed. We used to share, but now not so much. A few positive things about the development. We talked to some women in January, and some of them really dream about having their own plots with fences because they can cultivate and decide for themselves. And they're also involved in the new councils. And they really experience hardship right now because of the drought. Many of them have to go, even women and the children go to the forest, climbing high trees to cut leaves and running high risk both for wild animals and enemies from other areas. The implication of the subdivision for adaptation, there are also a lot of other negativities. The whole process, there's a lot of disagreement locally about allocation criteria, who gets right to land if they subdivide or not, who are included, especially people who haven't stayed for so long time in the area face the risk of being evicted. And there's even a process of selling off land even before it has been subdivided. There are uncertainties during the whole transition period from pastoralism to sedentarism. The fencing off, I mentioned already, this is also a very known challenge. Some hay, there's a study also in our project here on hay. All in all, a lot of problems. So I'm almost there.
1 minute.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So this is the last slide, or second last slide, but the last one I want to say something. I would think that there really is a main issue, and the main issue we want to move or to have attention to is the strong link between land access and land rights on the one hand and adaptation on the other hand. Because if you don't take land tenure, land access, land rights into consideration, then you cannot even talk about adaptation. So we think we need to continue asking how to safeguard pastoralism against climate change and other external threats. We want to say that land tenure systems are decisive for adaptation strategies, both for options and limitations. I mean, you can see options in the developments, but you certainly can also see problems ahead, many problems, that there needs to be a debate on land, which not only focuses on property, because it seems to have the opposite effect, but you need also to look at land uses. Finally, increased legislative focus on how to manage the processes towards the end process of having this community land, not only on the end result. And with this, I will show my last photo, and I will say thank you to all the members of our team. Sorry, I haven't put all your names. I should have done that. But we have 4 PhD students. We have several senior researchers, and all have contributed to this presentation. So kick climate change out of Kenya. I think that's a nice picture to end this presentation.
Whoa. Wow. Kick climate change out of Kenya, kick climate change out of Africa. Definitely. Thank you very much, Professor Eben, for sharing all the insight about the complexity of land and in light of adaptation. Here where I just put down adaptation happens on land, and land tenure system affect who makes decisions on the land, who owns it, who can work on it, and how. So great insights. Thank you very much. Leah, can you please show face? At this moment, we are starting our reflections. Thank you, Leah. I wanted to feel the crowd. All right. So at this moment, we need to hear some insights, some questions, what resonates with you? What questions do you still have? What is your takeaway from the 2 previous speakers? And would like to add one top up for you from Charity Mwangi of SDI. Charity Mwangi, how can you use 2 minutes to share a rich experience? Please come and take up that challenge. In the meantime, yes, please. I see you are ready. Please go on. In the meantime, let's keep receiving some comments and questions in the chat. Yes, over to you, Charity.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful presentation. I think 2 minutes is quite a challenge, but I'll try to summarize. I think I was quite intrigued by what Herman especially mentioned on Mukuru. That's because we are also very passionate about Mukuru. We've worked there for quite a while. And just to mention, I'll begin my entry point by mentioning the informal settlements in Nairobi. He had said that we might have that data. And it's true that in Nairobi, we have a lot of informal settlements. In actual sense, there are 158. And in Nairobi, we have a lot of climate issues that are happening. And unfortunately, the most vulnerable groups are the groups in the informal settlements. Yet, if you look in actual sense, they are the least persons who cause these climate change effects. Yeah, especially issues to do with carbon footprints, which are coming from the neighboring industries, but it is them who are exposed to these challenges because they are located on ecologically fragile lands. So we do have a project that we are calling Voices for Just Climate Action, which has tried to look at solutions. The project is very much solution oriented, and it is basically trying to amplify the voices of the climate vulnerable groups in the urban informal settlements in order to combat climate change effects. So this program has gone ahead to map or rather profile local climate actors within the informal settlements. And significantly in Nairobi, we have a lot of these actors. We have around 363 that we have mapped so far in Nairobi, and they are doing a lot of activities which range from waste management, urban agriculture, conversion of waste spaces into productive spaces, among other activities. However, we are seeing that a lot of the activities within these groups are not synergized, and this is because of lack of resources. And when we say resources, we mean the financial resources and also the technical resources. So I just put my video so people can see as I speak. Yeah, so there's a lot of that challenge. So as micro grantees of ARA, one of the things we did is we tried to collaborate with the county government of Nairobi in the launching of the County Climate Action Plan, which was very successful. And the County Action Plan is a bit ambitious. We think it has 11 indicators of trying to address climate issues. And one of the key ones we are seeing is addressing the issue of waste, which is a menace in the city. And we're also seeing the plan trying to reduce the carbon footprint. However, with all these plans or indicators in place, we are cognizant that the city is lacking a climate change policy. It also does not have a climate change act, and it doesn't have a climate change finance act. So whenever we are lacking these frameworks and we do have a plan in place, then the local groups that we've mapped, among other groups, are not able to benefit from the plan. So what we are saying, even as micro-grantees of ARA, is to see how we can try to develop frameworks together with the county government of Nairobi and our local communities in order for the climate resources that are in the community level to trickle down to the ward levels, which is the lowest administrative unit. And then from this level, the climate groups can benefit and they can be able to improve and scale up their activities. And this will definitely lead to adoption of ecosystem plans, which will be done at city level. So we are trying to see how to synergize the efforts of these groups through that entry point of developing frameworks. And yeah, we've had a lot of collaboration with the county, we've developed MOUs, and we think this is one of the steps forward towards addressing climate issues, because we are seeing the question we are asking ourselves is, why do we have a lot of climate actors at the local level or at the grassroots levels? It is a good thing, but it is not a factor to be celebrated, because it simply means that there is a role that the state is supposed to be playing that it is not playing. And that is why we have a lot of climate actors coming to bridge that gap. So then we are looking at ways of the state, of course, the civil society and the local groups complementing each other in order to achieve this. I think I'm exhausted by 2 minutes. So I'll pass over to you, Eddie. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Charity. And I would like to invite Dr. Professor Eben, and then I'm looking for my presenters here. Yes, Professor Eben, and then Herman, just come back for a moment, show your video for a moment so that we can try to digest what each other shared, and will not use too much time.
Yes, Eddie, since you're bringing in Professor Iben, I think from her presentation, I'd just like her to briefly comment on the role of women in the research project. I noticed that one of the sentiments was that when you're speaking about lands, then women have no say. And one of the participants also alluded to the same. So how is the project trying to deal with the issue of gender inclusivity? Is it part of the aspect of the fieldwork that they're doing, or will it be also part of the outcome, so that then the project is not only inclusive, but it touches on gender transformation, seen as pastoralists are not really keen on such aspects? Thanks.
It certainly also includes women. And this January, we're focusing especially on women's experience with the whole process of the law implementation. And we can see that, as I said, if you if you see the new laws there, it's very progressive with regard also to including women in deciding on community land. But when it comes to including them in the process towards deciding what's going to happen in the future, they are not included at all for many reasons. They are not aware about their rights and the new laws because they simply are not coming or invited, or at least they're not participating in public meetings, and they're not used to being heard anyway. So of course there are always some very strong women that do, but in general most women are very they don't know that they actually are in the new law, that they have these rights. And the problem really is that they're not involved in the process towards the new situation. So, and that's exactly, I think it's one of the big reasons that things are happening as they are now, because those who are used to be in power, and they are very concerned that their power will be undermined. So better subdivide, make sure that the same ones have power over land, and make sure you don't get the broad majority of youth and women involved in the decision-making processes. And then of course, sorry, I could, that is a... I know,
that's... Thank you very much. I mean, there's a lot to share, Professor Eben, if I could put a challenge to you, what question would you offer Herman, with all the mapping of Mukuru and the flood risk modeling, and I know that could connect to land as well. Yeah, please pose a question to Herman.
I'm wondering how you have considered the issue of conflicting interest among local people in relation to the whole issue of adaptation in these areas you've been looking at, because you know I think there's so many problems involving local people in decision making, and you don't really see that. It's very rare that you actually succeed. And one of the challenges, I think, is also that there are contradicting interests at the local level.
Conflict of interest. Yeah. Herman, could you please go on and answer that question, as well as 2 insights that you would like to leave with us for scaling up such community labs in other cities? Over to you, Herman.
Thank you so much, Eddie, and thanks, Professor Eben, for posing the question. It's a privilege you have given me to answer. So just to answer the question, yes, I understand the issue of the conflict of interest, especially in the informal settlement, and that could be, and probably Charity may allude to that, could be the reason why implementing some of the research could not be possible, especially when you go to the informal settlement and then you are doing research and subsequently you are doing research. So ideally, how we were able to go about with this, it was how do we make sure that the agenda based on our research is able to feed into what the community needs. And how is it being able to feed into the national government program? Because as Charles said that, yes, there exist policies, but there's what we call the disjoint among these policies and regulations that exist in especially in the county government of Kenya. And then the other thing is that when you look at the voices of this community, how do we go about it? Because for us, we approached it in a bottom-up, where we give the community the opportunity and we present it to the higher level. So with that, we are able to listen from all both perspective of the policy level, from the NGO level, from the household level, from the research level, and then that's where we have what we bring to create what we call the citizen science, where everybody is being involved at a different level, but the output is geared towards supporting everyone holistically. So about the two insights that Eddie has said.
In your final minute, yes.
Yes, I think the idea here is how do we make sure that the voice of the community is being scaled up, and how do we use the social data and the computation data, the physical modeling and the social data and the physical modeling to be able to come up with a more driven research that is output that is research driven to support the community in a way that the output that we already have, it's able to scale and looking into the future visioning of the community. And that's to make sure that the policies that we are implementing within the within any city, it's well informed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Teach, amplify the voice of the people, of the community, and as well as make usage of social data. Now, you have a question down there. Please feel free to answer it in the chat as we proceed to the next. All the way from Kenya, we are flying over free flight to Ghana. Tickets have been paid by Zoom and ARIN. All right, Mr. Jonathan Goka, enhancing adaptive strategies in the coastal climate, adaptive strategies? Yes, in the coastal, in the coastal areas. Where are you? Where are you? And Dr. Nwamaka, when your Zoom cooperates with you, please indicate in the chat so that I can give you the chat. All right, Jonathan Goka, over to you. How could you use 7 minutes to tell us about coastal erosion and adaptive strategies undertaken to address that?
Okay, am I sharing my slide or you do so?
Probably start by telling the story as we see Leah or another person sharing the slides.
Yeah,
all right.
Thanks. Let him share his slides. Yeah. Jonathan, please go ahead.
Yes, please go ahead as the slides come up. The experience is still with you.
All right, thanks so much for the opportunity, and I wish to share this within the 7 minutes. So this I already said still is disabled. I can't share this. This work, this research to coastal destruction.
I hope the coastal erosion is not entering into the network.
Ghana, local communities to adapt to the changing situation they are experiencing. And can you hear me?
Yes, but
Eddie,
occasionally
can you just indicate if you can hear me?
I can hear you, but occasionally breaking on my side.
Yeah, you're breaking, Jonathan. Perhaps if you could be clearer.
Perhaps it's the internet, in which case we will allow you to switch off the video and then have your slides up.
Wow. What about the other participants so that I open the video, if that helps?
Please go on and then we
can
tell.
Very well.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. My slides haven't still come for me to speak to. Who is working on it?
Leah, I trust that you are having this under control.
Yeah. Jonathan, please just go ahead. Let me sort that out.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we did this work and had consultations with the local communities who are undergoing this experience. Number one, some of these communities have a peculiar situation because they are found in between the sea and the lagoon. So the land space available for them, it's quite small. And this is what they use for both their livelihood activities and their commercial or residential facilities. So there is serious need for space within the communities that are already experiencing this sort of coastal distraction. So we organized our research into three parts. We went down to look at the effectiveness of the adaptation strategies that governments or the national government authorities have put in place to alleviate the plight of the communities. Then number two, we also sought out to find if there is any data that is essential for adaptation planning along the coastal stretch of Ghana. Then thirdly, we sought to find out the capacity needs of the various stakeholders that is necessary to implement effective adaptation strategies within the communities to alleviate the plight of the people. So the context here is to, there is increasing incidence of flood and erosion along Ghana's coast due to sea level rise.
So I've been informed that now you can share your slides.
Okay. Let me do so. Okay. Adia, are we able to see my slide?
We saw them, but then they are not able. They are not
visible.
Yeah.
Technology. Wow. Let me try it the last time. If it doesn't work, I'll continue my presentation.
Absolutely. Yes.
I don't know.
And of course, the African culture is the culture of stories. You can always tell the story about
screen sharing.
the experience. Now you need to look for the
All right,
slides.
so let me continue. I think this is wasting my time. So when we went into the communities, we visited 3 areas across the stretch of Ghana who are experiencing this. And the key messages that we got from this visit or stakeholder groups are that the hard engineering solutions which government is providing by way of sea defense walls are becoming ineffective in the longer term, in that once the sea defense is constructed across a community front, the problem goes further down to other communities who are experiencing the effect of the sea defense wall that is constructed in other communities. So the problem keeps moving from one community to the other. Anytime there is a high level of there is high level in the sea, it goes to affect communities who don't have the sea defense wall. Then there is substantial lack of natural-based solutions in some of these communities where we have mangrove, acacia, coconuts, which are the natural resilience materials that the communities formerly used to respond to sea level rise, or if there is influx of sea into the communities. Some of these vegetations are off the coastal areas, and we believe this is also part of the problem that the communities are facing. Number three, there is gap in terms of data availability for adaptation planning, especially at the national level. And there is poor linkage between institutions which are supposed to be managing our coast in terms of their plans, in terms of their strategies, what they are doing. There needs to be some harmony in the work of these national institutions to bring adaptation to bear to our people in the coastal communities. We need to promote community-led governance and management of coastal resources. The community leaders or the communities as a whole are taken out in some of these decisions making regarding adaptive capacities for coastal communities. Their involvement in the process is very limited. Maybe the reason being that they are not so much technical and can contribute, but we believe they have local knowledge that can strengthen what is being done by government and national institutions. And generally, there is a lack of coastal management policy that would bring together all stakeholders and coordinate development along our coast. It is done in an isolated manner or in silos, and this is a major gap in our development that we need to really work at. It's now that stakeholders in charge of the climate space, are thinking to come out with a draft of such a policy. So some of the institutions that we engaged during this process were the government agencies, the local groupings within the communities, the fishmongers, the fishermen, the farmers, and all identifiable stakeholders in the communities that have something to do with the shoreline. Then we have CSOs or NGOs who are also working with communities in this space. Then the traditional authorities, we met with them, the academia and research, who played a very critical role in giving us information on the kind of data they are collecting and how we can tap into that resource in order to link some of the planning process that we want to do between the communities and government, so that local knowledge on adaptation can be blended with what national technical institutions are doing to bring relief to our people. So in short, these are some of the processes we've gone through. And in conclusion, the key messages here are that stakeholder consultations were very successful, but there are similarities between the coastline in terms of the coastline architecture. But generally, from one community to the other, the dynamics are a bit different, and the adaptation strategies need to be tailored to meet the needs of each of the community's needs. So it might not be a uniform process, but based on the similarities between the shoreline in the communities, we could come out with strategies to alleviate the plight of our people. So I'll end it here. If there are specific questions, then maybe I could rather respond to it. Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much. Yeah. And interestingly, we were able to see the slides. So if you're close, we may also be able to see who is putting up the hand and asking the question. Thank you, Jonathan, for that experience. Hey, okay, there you go. All right. Any question for Jonathan from our participants? This is the time where you ask clarifying questions, where you are able to. Yes. Okay. So I know that time is chasing after us, and we are also trying to fit within the remaining time. Our participants have been encouraging you to type in the chat. The chat is the best way to engage in such a big forum where we have many participants. So please make use of it, and then we can also be able to answer in the chat, or our participants can answer in the chat. But in the meantime, allow me to invite Charles Tony to tell us what happens
Eddie,
next. Yes.
Ed, I don't know if Nwamaka's audio is on right now, so that we give her 3 minutes.
Oh, it's working. Oh, well. Okay. There we go. Nwamaka, you.
Thank you very much, Eddie, and apologies, I had issues with those. Can Lee, are you able to share my slides?
Yes, Aaron is doing so shortly. Just proceed, please.
Okay, so I'm a researcher at the University of Leeds Institute for Social Research. Yeah. Sustainability Research Institute. So we worked on climate smart fisheries. What does climate smart fisheries mean to coastal communities in Sierra Leone and Liberia? And just to say that fishing is not just a hobby, it's a serious business and a source of livelihood for poor communities. Talking about livelihood, it goes beyond food, but a source of income. People depend on it to take care of their families in Sierra Leone and Liberia, and in other West African countries where we have over 120 million fishers. These communities do not have any social security from government. And so what we have seen over time is that climate change continues to heat up waters around the tropics. It then means that fish is increasingly not surviving in our waters. They are moving towards, swimming towards the temperate region. And then how does it impact the fishers? The fishers have to survive, to take care of their families, to feed their families, to make money. So they continue to chase this fish. Oftentimes with their little canoe, not sophisticated canoes, they drown and lose their lives. And then the women become widows. If they are lucky, they spend so much on fuel because they have to travel very far to catch very few fish. The next slide. And so we engaged with these fishers. We had representatives from affected communities, vulnerable group, women, elderly. We had researchers from the institutes in Liberia and Sierra Leone. We had people from the meteorological agencies. We have private investors, and we have staff from the Ministry of Fisheries in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And together we went through 4 processes with them. The first one is peer-to-peer workshop. During this time, we tried to conquer ideological differences, made sure that the widows, the elderly people were very comfortable. There was no suspicion. We used that to build trust. We were able to learn how to talk to each other. And so that took us to the next stage. We looked at the problems facing the women talked about their problem, the men talked about their problem, and then we interpreted this problem and tried to find similarities. And then we looked at transforming the problem. What the local communities have done, they try to adapt in various ways. For example, of course, climate change affects their housing, affects a whole lot of things around them. But most importantly, the fishers risk their life. They try to cut the mangroves. They try to catch baby fish, to sell baby fish. And when you catch baby fish and fish eggs, it reduces the amount of fish you have in your water. The mangroves itself are carbon, they try to absorb CO2. But for these fishers to survive, and especially the women fishmongers, they need to cut down these mangroves to smoke their fish. The next slide, please. And so what we co-created with the community is what we call our climate smart fisheries. Already what the communities also do is to catch juvenile fish from the marine and then try to grow them in ponds, in buckets, just to survive. And so that was helping them. When we came in, we looked at, can we use meteorology? Can we strengthen the meteorological agencies in this country? Oh yes, it was something we all accepted to do, because then the meteorological agency will give us weather information date back 3 months, 6 months, and then we are able to look for fish species that can survive too much rainfall, excessive rainfall, that can survive heat. We also talked about if we do that and invest in aquaculture, that is growing fish from outside the water, then we can give some rest to the marine fish so that the fish going, or the fish we have over harvested, can replenish. So 3 components were developed during our co-creation: aquaculture, the growing of fish;
the less use or less harvesting of fish from the marine, and then the strengthening of weather in meteorological agencies in the two countries. The next slide. But then there's the misalignment of community priorities. Since the ARA project, since we completed this project and sent our report to government authorities in the two countries, we have discovered that while communities prioritize food security and income, there is so much hunger in the land, especially with climate change, chasing and helping our fish to swim towards the temperate. But what we have discovered is that the government or the agencies that support the government have rather invested in growing mangroves. Mangroves are helpful, but that is not the priority for local fishermen. The last slide, please. So on reflecting why there is always, because it's not just in Sierra Leone, it's not just in Liberia, we have found similar things in Ogoni, Nigeria, and in several African countries. I draw on my 2017, the research I carried out in 2017, where I concluded that communities are not closed containers. There is power in play. So in a community, whether we'd want to see it as your own community, there are external people that fund project. So they come up with their own ideas. There are community chiefs that normally we have seen them align with external funders. And when you look at the G, so in one community, you can have up to 6 sub-communities. When you look at the G, at the bottom are the vast majority, where you find women, you find children, you find the less privileged, the disabled. These ones just sit down there and then come for meetings, agree on things, but then there is always this power play. So what is the lesson? The lesson is, how can we future-proof adaptation measures against powerful elites? How can we make sure that whatever we have provided or whatever we are giving back to the community is what was agreed? And so when we looked at the method we used, if we go back to the slide.
Now, Nwamaka, I think what we need to do is give us that one. How can we do that? What are the 2 lessons that we can take away with? Because really time is running against us.
Okay, so what we are looking at is, can we look at the adaptation process from beginning to the end as a system, and then use exclusion theories or social inclusion principles to make sure that from the beginning to the end, there is co-implementation, co-evaluation, goes beyond research. If we don't do that, we continue to reinforce vulnerability and compound the problem of the people in G.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So co-production from beginning to the end will most likely help to enhance adaptation in the coastal areas. Thank you. That's an amazing story and wonderful insights emerging. Charles, I know that we have left for you almost nothing, but 1 minute. Please get it and use it and tell us what happens next. What's the way forward? Thank you, Charles.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks Eddie and the presenters. I wish to acknowledge especially the negotiators in the room, the researchers. I think I've seen Dr. Emily Masawa, who's the champion for equity, Dr. Ann Mwambia, who's one of the support team from Kenya. So thank you so much. The question that I'll ask, especially the presenters here, is that the research that you have undertaken so far, is it putting us in a position that you are really accelerating the championing for the outcome of COP26? Because there are 3 key outcomes which are a priority for Africa. One is increasing the climate funding, and especially the commitment which was made under the Paris Agreement to remit 100 billion USD per year, but also double the adaptation funding, which is Africa needs now close to 40 billion per year. And then also especially giving attention to loss and damage. And I think most of the researchers, you have tried as much as possible to really share concretely on how we can co-develop the tools to really undertake the assessment, both at the informal settlement urban settings, but also rural areas. But the question also that we need to ask ourselves is the research that we have undertaken after COP26, is it sufficient enough to support the African group of negotiators? If that is the case, then what are the channels on how we can really submit our position or the consolidated position from this kind of research work? And I think the research community in Africa, we need to really engage very strongly with the African group of negotiators, but also the lead negotiators at the country level to incorporate this kind of research output into the national reporting. And I think maybe you can hear the comments from the government representatives who have been leading in the national reporting. And as I've looked from Kenya, we have got Dr. Emily Masawa, is the capacity that we have as researchers. Are we capable of really transitioning this kind of lessons from the different research projects into the global stock tech? Because what Africa is calling for is the operationalization of the goal on adaptation. And we must provide the evidence, sufficient evidence, or repackage our outputs so that you can present a very concrete evidence at the COP26. Eddie, maybe you can hear from Dr. Emily Masawa and Dr. Ann Mwambia, who I've seen who are the lead negotiators in the room.
Sure. We can possibly offer a minute for each.
We can give them a minute. I don't know if they're on call and have heard you.
Okay, as they prepare, because that was something that I was feeling that we need to provide also as researchers, so that you don't just produce research, but that is not transitioning even to the national reporting. Dr. Ann Mwambia, I think I'd seen her. Dr. Emily Masawa. Okay, if they cannot reach them now, so we can conclude, and I'd like to conclude by saying that what the researchers have brought on board is we need to enhance, especially the understanding of the interaction between or among different sectors and also different systems. The nexus is very important. I think where the land access, which there must be a right to access for adaptation. We had also the communities being brought on board to co-produce relevant tools. We had also the need for policy support. Yeah,
I think we have the organizers telling us wrap up.
Okay, excellent.
But I thank you very much. Actually, it was really good for you to try to link the research to policymakers, and I hope that connection will go on despite that, we haven't been able to hear from the two doctors who are the lead negotiators.